So just to make sure our recording. Okay, there we go. Okay, so after some technical difficulties, I do apologize, but thank you all for joining us for our UTRU Winter 2023 membership meeting. Just by way of introduction, my name is Curtis Haring. I am the Executive Director of the Utah Transit Writers Union. Let me get our PowerPoint up and share the screen. All right, so you all should be looking at, do you all see the PowerPoint now? Just let me know. Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. And Representative Briscoe, thank you for coming on. I apologize for the confusion. Microsoft Teams does what Microsoft Teams does. Just by way of introduction, again, my name is Curtis Haring, the Executive Director of the Utah Transit Writers Union. I apologize for starting a little bit late. I just have a couple of items that we want to talk about first of all. So I'll start with our title screen, of course. Thank you for coming on today, our winter meeting. We have these on a quarterly basis. What is it, Chris? It's February, June, I believe.
February, May, September, October.
There we go. And so this is just our opportunity to kind of catch up and hear from leaders, both in the legislative branch this time, as well as from UTA. Just let us know what's going on. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to start off by talking about today's agenda. So just today, we're going to be doing welcomes and introductions. We will have a financial update. We will also be hearing from Representative Joe Briscoe from Salt Lake about transit in the legislature. Also, we'll be hearing from Gerber and Joey Alsop from UTA just to talk about their 5-year plan and kind of what's going on there as far as the driver shortage. Then we have some chapter updates and conclusion of Adjourn. So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to John. John, our newly elected president of UTRU. We did some moving around, and John was kind enough to step up now that we have our updated terms. So John, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Curtis, and welcome everyone. Glad you could be here on the Saturday morning. John Pearson, I am very pleased to be serving as the president of UTRU moving forward. And thank you for Chris and Curtis and everyone else who's been involved with UTRU and keeping it going through the pandemic. We're very much in a rebuilding phase right now. And so the goal is over the next few years, is to get chapters started and start to build political power, start to make transit something that people are talking about again. And we do have quite a few different issues within Utah where transit is near and dear to people, and they just may not even realize it yet. The air quality in Utah being such a big concern with the inversions, and then in the summer with our ozone, also with equity concerns around transit and people's ability to access it, but also making transit functional and making it so that it actually works as a good alternative for people. And that means frequency, that means coverage, that means more buses everywhere. And when we do that, we make it so it's not just an alternative, but it's a preferred mode of travel. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Curtis, and we'll start to get things on the road with our very nice speakers who joined us this morning.
Yes, thank you very much. Just before we dive into that, we do want to do some nuts and bolts, just some financial updates from Chris Stout, our treasurer here. So Chris, I have the numbers that you sent over, and we'll just get those pulled up right now. But if you kind of want to go over that and talk a little bit more, that'd be great.
Yeah, so basically the financial position looks pretty good. At the beginning of the year, this fiscal year, which starts the beginning of November, which is when after we've elected all of our officers and we get together and we get the year moving. Basically, based on all of the donations we had through October for dues paying members, we had 2885.89. Since then, we've had contributions of $657.70, and that's come from a variety of sources. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but one of the number one contributor this past quarter has been Curtis Haring. One of the things that he has been doing is he's been donating a portion of the wages that he's been earning as our executive director. That's great, but he's primarily been doing it because when the money runs out, then Curtis is no longer able to perform his duties. And one of the things that I did as co-founder and into trying to keep the union moving is that I said I couldn't do it all by myself, and I was pretty much doing everything, president, treasurer, secretary, everything. So basically, I said we needed to get money and we needed to get a paid executive director so that we can move forward, and it's worked. Curtis has done a wonderful job, and so we appreciate his contributions, but we need to get that changed. We've earned 37 cents of interest over those couple of months. So we had operating income basically of 35.43.96 for this year so far. Payroll expenses have been 1879.30. Fees were $5.05 for PayPal transfers. So basically, we spent $1,884.35, and our cash on hand as of right now is $1,659.61. The biggest way that we are operating right now is from contributions from dues paying members. Curtis and I will be working on obtaining some grants, and we'll be working on a couple of ideas on how to build the nest egg a little bit further. One of the long range goals that I had when I started the union and when I got Curtis on board is it would be really nice if we could afford a full-time executive director. And I suspect as our chapters grow and as our membership grows, that we'll be able to do that. But right now we're still a little short on that. One thing that we have talked about in getting more money is to basically offer gifts and items that will have the UTRU logo on them. And there'll be I mean, right now I think our dues are set at $5 or $15 or something. I forget what it is, but it's a
Sorry, Chris,
minimum
yeah,
amount.
Yes, it's $5 or whatever your daily transit cost is. We try to keep it relatively low so that people can participate. But yes, it's not a huge ask.
Yeah, it's not a huge ask, but one thing is that we are a 501c3, so any money that you donate is tax deductible. But unfortunately, because of the way, and I'm an accountant, because of the way the tax code works, unless you own a house and are very rich, the benefits for donating to a 501c3 just aren't there. And just to kind of give you an idea, so right now I'm the number one contributor to UTRU, but in order to get the tax benefit, personally, I don't have enough deductions in my personal, so the business donates it, and that's where we get the tax benefit there. So all the money that my business donates is tax deductible. So one of the things that we will be working on in the upcoming year is to try to get people that need the tax deductions, who have the money, that would be willing to put money into the organization. But one of the other ways, again, is that we'll be offering a variety of swag: T-shirts, coffee mugs, oven mitts, pajamas, whatever we can put our name on and our logo that we think people will want, that you can donate to, and I don't know, they might be a little overpriced, who knows, but it'll have that UTRU logo on it, and you can when you get on the bus, try not to wear your pajamas on the bus, although there are a lot of people that actually do wear their pajamas on the bus. So I mean, I guess it'll work.
To each their own.
Yeah, to each their own. It's okay. We're not judgmental here. So, but that's one of the things that we'll be working on. Will be a tier system and some swag in the UTRU store. But again, I'm really excited. Like I said, having a lot of the work that I've been doing pushed off to other members, other officers. John is fully capable to handle the duties, and the other people that we've assigned, Bree as secretary, and the other two vice presidents, which are Mike and Randy, I believe. But anyway, that is the financial update. Well, hopefully we'll have more money. The way that the way the process is working right now, we probably have, with Curtis donating, I would estimate that we probably have 4 or 5 months of funds in order to pay Curtis. So we'll be working on expanding that money, definitely.
And the financial addendum, the UCARE grant that was awarded to the University of Utah has a line item for $2,000 to the UTRU. And so the work on the transit advocacy manual and educational piece. And so that'll stretch things out a little bit further. And we're for the grant funding as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we want to at least give you some swag and items and things like that, just to wear it a little bit prouder. Say that you're an advocate for transit in the state of Utah. Also, we did talk about fundraising events, so keep an eye out on those as well as we continue to move forward. But I want to move on to our next section of the events today. We do have a couple speakers from UTA a little bit later on, but for right now, I want to hand the time over to Representative Joel Briscoe. Representative Briscoe is representing the area of Salt Lake City and has been a longtime advocate for transit in the state of Utah. We are in the middle of the legislative session right now. It is starting to wrap. It's in the beginning of the end, so to speak, starting to wrap up a little bit. But March 3rd is the last day of the legislative session. So I don't want to take up too much more time. I mostly just wanted to say thank you to Representative Briscoe for being here today. And I will go ahead and hand the floor over to you.
Am I on? Can you hear me?
You're on, yes.
Great. You know, every time we've done zero fares, and we don't call it no fare or free fare. Every time we've done zero fare UTA, more people ride mass transit, whether it's one day, whether it's 2 or 3 days, whether it's a month. The experiment last February, a year ago, paratransit showed an increase, microtransit showed an increase, buses showed an increase, track showed an increase. Front Runner went crazy on Saturdays, 160, 170% increase for a month. The next logical step would be 1 year, and I was not totally surprised, but very happy to see the governor put it in his budget request for this year. When I spoke to KSL Radio, they said, well, is that good? I go, heck yeah, that's good. In fact, I think probably a 1 year pilot is probably the next logical step to trying this out. And we have lots of advocates. Mayor Wilson, Mayor Mendenhall, Salt Lake County's been a big supporter. Other private entities and nonprofits and NGOs have contributed to all these 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 1 month, 2 week around NBA free fares. So it's on people's lips and people are talking about it. When I was a year ago, well, this past end of summer, beginning of fall, I was in Denver for national legislative meetings. And in August, they did zero fare for clean air on like 8 or 9 counties on the Front Range. We did it first in February. They copied us in August. Because it's part of the governor's budget, when the department, I'm trying to remember who UTA reports through. I think it's in the IGG, Infrastructure and General Government Appropriations Subcommittee. They made the request. They present the governor's budget. And then the legislature does what it will with the governor's budget, adds to and takes away. So the $25 million requested by the governor is there. Now, the Senate President Adams, has said some very positive things about extending transit availability. He uses the frame of economic viability and economic mobility and economic growth. I've heard from a few Republican colleagues in the House that they will never support zero fare transit. I've not spoken to anyone in Republican leadership in the House, but I'm told they are not fans. So what happens the last week and a half of the legislature? On Tuesday, we'll get updated revenue figures to see whether maybe the economy is picking up a little, maybe it's slowing down. They'll have a little bit more, a little bit less money to play with, and then the jockeying begins. Does the House hate the concept of zero fare transit so much that they will use it as a bargaining chip? I don't know. We'll see. I'm not in the room when those kind of things happen. But the governor made a big move by asking for it. And kudos, my hat's off to him. It's good to be on the same page with the governor. When I proposed it, the various measures I proposed over the years, my principal reasoning has been clean air, and that's not changed. But I was totally unprepared for the people who communicated with me last year. I mean, an email from a mother in Utah County who was excited because they're going to take their numerous children on Front Runner and then buses and tracks to go to a museum in Salt Lake County. A friend who told me about his friend who's a school teacher who was planning some end-of-year field trips. They hurried them up and did them in February because it cost them so much less money to put all the children on zero fare transit. A woman representing a nonprofit that works with cancer, people being treated for cancer, who was excited because she said the people they were helping and assisting were going to be able to make their office visits, their treatments, to see their doctors so much more easily. These are not things I counted on. I mean, I'm sure most everyone on this on this Zoom call has a car, and we've built our society around vehicle transportation. But there's a whole set of people in our midst who don't have cars, and we don't think about them very often. And we ought to think about them more often. My daughter lives in New York City, and she doesn't have a car. She doesn't need a car because of the density of the people and their mass transit system. So no matter what happens this session, I still think we're on a roll, and I don't think this is going away.
Awesome, thank you. We have a little bit of time for some questions and answers from you. So if there's anybody that does have something, feel free. We've got a small enough group.
I have a question. Joel, this is Chris Stout. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. I always appreciate what you do, and I think you know that. But and by the way, I gave up my car back in September. I had bought a brand new Tesla in 2020, and I put 2,000 miles on it, and then I said I don't need to drive to the store. I don't need to drive to a lot of places, and so now I'm completely. I use the bus everywhere I go, but of course I work here at home. But so the question I have is. And this gets a little bit into the minutia. I mean, yeah, great. We're talking to the Republicans, and finally they're coming around that the no fare, zero fare is a good idea. But one of the things that I worry about is that if we give $25 million this year, what kind of money are we going to give to expand the service? Because obviously if it's free fare, everybody in Harriman, or not everybody, but some people in Harriman are going to want to come into Salt Lake, and there's going to be more people that want to use the system, but the system is not as frequent or has wider coverage. So can you speak to that, and whether anybody has actually thought about that idea, or are we just kind of in this, hey, this sounds good idea phase?
That's a constant source of discussion. We're always talking about that. Some of the representatives from the southwest part of the county make your point, which is, well, we might be more willing to support you if we thought that it was valuable to us. And it would be more valuable to us if it were buses every 10 or 15 minutes and covering more places. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg issue. Should we expand service first and then tell people, oh, see how cool this is? Let's make it more available economically. Couple of issues there. Speaking to Beth Holbrook and other people at Wasatch Front Regional Council, some of the money for transit improvements from Washington, D.C. flows with ridership, and you hit certain levels, certain amounts of money become more available to you. A year ago, when I spoke to some people at UTA, they were not anti-zero fares, but they weren't exactly jumping up and down. I get a different vibe from UTA now when we talk about this. And one of the issues is, if we did jump up ridership for a year, what I'm hearing from some is it might put us in a better situation for going to the Department of Transportation and going, look, people want this. And as you allocate money around the country, don't you want to see victories? And don't you want to be able to, to have showcases, and let's make Utah a showcase. I also had a discussion with Mr. Gruber at Wasatch Front Regional Council, and he can spin out more policy on transit in a minute, that I could think of in a month. And he was really off on one, and he said I gave him an idea about how we might be able to fund transit improvements. I mean, we need both. I also have a study that someone shared with me that they took the capital city in all 50 U.S. states, and they said, what does it cost to ride transit in the capitals of all the U.S. states? And Utah's is one of the 1 or 2 highest. Transportation costs are high for people in Utah. From an equity point of view, we can do better on pricing. And zero fares are scalable. I've had some Republicans tell me, well, what if you just made it zero fares for kids K to 6, kindergarten through 12th grade? Let's get young riders going. When my daughter was going to Ames Charter School at Cottonwood High, they gave her a transit pass, all the students, and she'd walk up to 13th East and get on the bus. It dropped her off right in front of Cottonwood. She'd get on the bus and come home and walk 2 blocks home. I mean, it was perfect for her. It's not going to be perfect for everyone everywhere in the county. So, Chris, I mean, one of the things URTU can help me do is we can work with people and try and come up with some alternatives that lower fares, if not zeroing them out does it have to be an either or? Can it be both? Can we find a way that we can lower fares, zero out fares, and increase service? Another issue here is bus drivers. Lots of people with CDL licenses are retiring, and there's not a lot of people in their 20s and 30s that want to start bus driving. And this is an issue for UTA, for freight transit across the country, and it's not different in Utah.
That's great. Are there any other questions from the group?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, thanks, Rep. Briscoe, for joining us today. Also, thank you for being an advocate for many years for clean air and for transit in Utah. I want to echo Chris's concern around free fares and around frequency. When I speak to people at the University of Utah, nobody pays for a transit pass there. It's included as part of your employment. And I work at the University of Utah Health as an anesthesiologist there. So I speak to people in the operating room, techs, nurses, other physicians, residents. And what I hear over and over is that the barrier is not cost. For them, there's no cost. The barrier is that someone coming from the southwest part of the valley, or someone coming not from a direct line, or someone coming from the north, where we used to have front runner connecting to a bus that would connect you right to campus, is frequency, is service, is coverage. That you can't tell people to take the bus when it takes an hour and a half and 3 transfers to get to work each day. You know, that is a much bigger cost than the cost of the fares. And so, you know, when we're talking about increasing ridership and this chicken and egg, how do we get increased ridership? I think services like you mentioned around free passes for students is a great way to increase ridership. Services like fare capping, which is something the UTA had an experiment on, and something that should be followed up and looked at as well. Things like tying free transit passes to low-income housing, and to subsidize in that manner as well, and working with community partners, great ways to increase accessibility. And then one thing I'd love to point you out to is called tactical bus routes or tactical transit. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Barr Foundation kind of started this in Boston. And what they did, one thing that's a problem with transit is an increasing frequency and increasing stuff like bus rapid transit, is that there's this very long planning process, very intensive community outreach. And what that leads to is the people who are most committed to opposing are always the ones who are showing up, and those that may be supportive, their support may be lukewarm or they may be excited, but it takes 3, 4, 5 years to see one improvement in terms of bus rapid transit. And we've seen that in Utah as well as other places. And so what the Barr Foundation did to circumvent this was to partner with town municipalities. They partnered with Everett to start, and then it ended up being such a success they moved on to others to create an experiment rapid transit line. And so they cleared out some parking. They said it's only going to be temporary. They cleared out a bus lane, and they started rapid transit bus line in an area where they thought it would be successful. And it was highly successful. It was loved. There was a ton of positive momentum that was built from that. Other cities in Boston have picked it up and run with it, and those transit lines were made permanent. And this whole process took less than 6 months. And so once that funding, those partnerships are in place, you can see this type of tactical bus lines that will drive increases in ridership. And so more of a comment, I guess, but I did want to bring this up to you, and it's just my question then becomes, is tactical transit and experimental transit in this manner, is that something that has been on the agenda at all at the UTA and with the reps at the House?
One thing we are not, having been a school board member, we're not a good 105-member school board, and I don't think we ought to be bus transit route planners. Don't give those people up there any ideas, because they might think that they should do it. But, this is why private nonprofits like UTRU exists. It's because everyone on this call, we all want to see better transit, and I hadn't heard of that, and it makes immense sense to show people that you can identify a need and bring it into fruition within a year, and they can see the benefits as opposed to an elongated process. If you live in Salt Lake City, you're just used to lots of planning charrettes, and they're not bad things, but most people don't have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year time horizon they're willing to commit to. So, what I'd love to do is visit with you all, and let's do, I'm sure everyone on this call's got some ideas. I hadn't heard of tactical, so that's a good idea. And we ought to get together this summer and talk about transit policy and what we can push forward that we think makes sense.
That's great. I always love to hear an open-minded and inquisitive representative, and we're happy to send some information along about tactical transit and the successes that it's had.
And anything else you think is worth looking at? I realize that in one sense, zero fares are a little bit of a blunt hammer. I think it could have some positive impacts. It's not the only thing that could have a positive impact.
Yeah, absolutely. My main concern with zero fare is the expansion of transit. As transit gets expanded and you increase ridership, fares become an important part of the financial sustainability of transit agencies. And so you see transit agencies with high ridership numbers like New York and Toronto, and they are pretty dependent on fares. And in many ways, fares from people who can afford it subsidize those who can't afford it. And so you work in ways to increase equity to those that are lower income, make sure they have the access that's needed. And then you've got
in Eastern Europe, they have a lot of holdover practices from before the Berlin Wall fall. Some cities it's zero fare over 65 and under 16. In some cities it's the unemployed. And in Estonia, if you live in Tallinn, you have to be registered to live in Tallinn, but they charge tourists and people who are visiting from out of the city. 20,000 people moved into the city, said, "Oh, I live in Tallinn," so they could ride zero fare. I mean, there's a lot of permutations and variations of this. And then, but when you start being, I mean, I personally think, women have children who are under a certain income level should get like zero fare transit. They should just have the ability to get around and not have to rely upon punch cards from the DWS. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the next steps are. Let's see if this goes. If it doesn't go, then we should all put our heads together and decide what some next positive steps could be. Because even if the legislature isn't quite ready for zero fares, and I would rather have the problem of, oh my gosh, so many people are riding, we got to get more drivers. I'd rather have the problem of trying to meet increased demand than trying to keep a system going that's dying.
Well, on that, yeah, thank you again on that note, Representative, for coming on. You're more than welcome to stick around, but I do want to move on to our next guest. And I should add that you are obviously very easy to get a hold of. Anybody on the call, you just want to go to, is it Rep Briscoe? I can't remember what's your legislative email, or how do you prefer to get a hold of? You're muted, Joel. Joel, you're muted.
Sorry. The letter J Briscoe at le.utah.gov. Is there a chat box? I'll just type it in.
It should be on there. If not, we will be able to get that up as well.
Okay.
But yes, thank you again, Representative. I'll get your contact info up in the chat in a moment. But I do want to hand it over to UTA now. I went ahead. I apologize. And so, like I said, I do want to hand it over to UTA. They are here today to talk a little bit more about not only just the free fare that we've been discussing already, but more specifically to be discussing the recent 5-year plan that we had sent out. Well, not we, UTA had sent out, apologies. And kind of some of the ideas behind that. And also the driver shortage to kind of address that situation as well. So we have Greg Gerber and Joey Alsop, excuse me, from UTA to kind of talk a little bit more about that. So I will go ahead and hand the floor over to you guys.
Okay. My name is Joey Alsop. I'm a service planner for UTA. I've done that for about 15 years now. And basically my role is I'm the route planning supervisor, so I oversee the design of the bus system and how we integrate with our major projects and major investments like Front Runner and Tracks and UVX. I'll go ahead and share. So I'll talk about the 5-year service plan, and Greg can touch upon strategies that we've been doing to try to address our labor shortage. Hold on one sec. I like to see people's faces when I'm giving presentations, so hold on. All right, are you guys seeing seen the 5-year service plan presentation? Okay. It's a rather long presentation, so I do want to ask, I mean, I can skip over the process stuff and focus on the actual plan. Would you prefer me to do that?
I think that'd be best. Just kind of, since the process is over, right? So kind of what is the plan? What are the next steps? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. So as John alluded to, the process is rather intense and lengthy, and some of that is UTA onus, but also because we're federally funded, there's policies associated with that and requirements, and so on the UTA side, where we have to adhere to certain guidelines from the federal government. So that's why one reason it takes so long, which includes the public engagement process. So I don't know how many of you have actually seen the draft, but this is the final draft. This is just a chart going through each of the lines and identifying lines that are going to be discontinued or changed, or new service. So, and you can, the website for the plan is in the bottom left corner as well. So you guys can actually go and see what the plan is. And it was approved by the local advisory board this past Wednesday, which means it goes to the board for approval now. So we have it broken down into the 5 years. And so between this plan and the previous plan, the previous 5-year service plan, we were working on had a lot of expansion, and then COVID hit, and that changed everything. We had to change our approach, and so we're still, so we went from being in an expanding phase to now we're in a rebuilding phase again, and we were in a rebuilding phase before. And so we got, with COVID and labor shortages and supply shortages, we got a setback for a couple of years there. Hopefully this has given you guys enough of a chance to look at the chart. So we do things based on change day, and our major changes are in August of each year. And we're trying to emphasize that most of our major changes take place in August as opposed to December or April.
So Joe, I have a question on that slide that had the dates. So those changes that you say in August of 2023, that just means there'll be a scheduled change. So like for instance, Track Saturday, does that mean it's going to increase service or it's just going to change?
So in this particular instance, on Track Saturday, I guess specifically for that is that we'll be going to 15-minute headways on Saturdays. And so everything else is either it's going to be a level of service change, whether it's frequency, span, the hours that we operate, or an actual alignment change, or an add of a route, or discontinuation of a route. So that's why you see tracks on there, is because we're expanding frequency on Saturdays. And
okay. So and then what does it mean by contingent on resources?
So I'll get on that. Get to
Okay.
that. So August 2023. The biggest constraint right now with us is obviously you guys are fully aware of this, is our labor. When ski service started in December, we were short 80 operators. We're now down to 65. So the struggle we're having is that we have more people either retiring or not making it through training or whatever. So we're having more people, more labor leave than we're getting in. And it's just having this ripple effect. And so that's one reason Greg Gerber from our labor department, HR department is here is to talk about that. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But that's been the primary constraint on the development of this 5-year service plan is we don't know when we're going to get operators. And we've been working with our HR department to figure that out. And so we were asked by the board to, okay, plan as though you have the operators, but because we have the money to do it. And so we're putting that money in contingency in case we have a good response in hiring. And so when you see reporting like this that says contingent on resources, that is contingent on whether we have enough operators to operate it. And so that's a function of what we're trying to do with hiring. So just real quick, so in August 2023, we were looking at originally transitioning the 902 to High Valley Transit. They've since decided that they would prefer to operate their Route 107, which is kind of a replication of what the 902 was doing previously. We went forward with that last August change day, because the labor shortage. By taking the 902 to 39th and Wasatch in Kimball Junction, we were able to go from 7 operators needed to operate the service to 2. And so it was rather significant. So for August change day in Ogden, OGX is going to be implemented, replacing the 603 and 650. That's kind of our priority for this year, just because that's a major project that's been in the works for years, and we're just want to get it implemented. Track service improvements on Saturdays, as mentioned. We're making some adjustments to some flex routes in August to address some reliability issues we're having with the F570. The F570 has been consistently running 10 minutes behind schedule. And the only way to fix that is to either cut it shorter or add more work to it. They call them blocks. So there's not enough time in the route to be able to do the route, and the only way to fix it is to add another bus to the mix. And that adding a bus to the mix is not an issue. It's the operator that's the issue. And so this is a solution that we came up with to maintain the same connections at the red line and the blue line and avoid the length it takes to get through the interchange at 7200 South and bypassing that altogether and using Midvale Center Street to do that and doing that much quicker. So that's kind of a minor change that we're looking at. Maintains the same coverage. And the change to the 202 is to try to accommodate the homeless resource center that's in that area as well. So as you guys are aware, we made some reductions on the Route 39, the 201, and 218. So that's kind of a high priority to restore the service on those routes. And this falls under the contingency of if we have the operators. So restoring that down in Timpanogos, Mount Timpanogos Garage, Utah County. The service unit down there has been working with Provo City and the MTC, and the MTC is working on a plan to have some flights out of the Provo airport. And one of the proposals that's being looked at is not necessarily taking the 6-minute headways of UVX out to the airport, but like what we're doing with East Bay, where we have a separate UVX line. There's debate on whether that should be UVX, called UVX or not, but that's a different issue. But the whole point is looking at providing a service that connects Provo Center Station to the Provo Airport via East Bay. Another contingency is, as we all are aware, ski service is a hot topic, and we've been steamrolled on our approach on this, and our approach was kind of distributing the service cuts across the entire system, and that included ski. And so this is on the contingency list for December of next year, depending on what operators we have. August 2024, I'm gonna go through this. Do you want me to go through this fairly fast? Okay.
Yeah, but just fairly briefly, because we do also want to give Greg an opportunity to talk about service nature.
Okay. So this August 2024, this would have been done during the time of the opening of OGX. These are the local changes in response to the opening of OGX. Southern Utah County, one thing that we're looking at is splitting the 821 and 822, kind of maximizing our coverage down there and improving travel time. Salt Lake County, this was the plan for August 2022, but labor became the problem, and so we're looking at making 15-minute headways on the Route 205. Looking into August 2025, we did have at one point 7.5-minute headways or 6 to 9 minute headways, whatever you want to call it, on Second South with the likes of the 220 and the 220s at 30-minute headways right now, and they leave right off after each other a lot of the time, so there's some bunching. And so this is the opportunity for us to create 7.5-minute headways on Second South, and creating a counterclockwise route going around campus. Some of you may be aware we're actually operating that right now with the All-Star service. August 2026, this is some restoration of service, as well as implementation of the Mid-Valley Connector and responding changes of other routes too. Ogden in August 2026, we're looking at splitting the 470 in preparation for a potential implementation of the Davis Salt Lake City connector. We would initially be starting, so we would split it at Farmington Station. We'd run 15 minutes on this Route 600, 30 minutes on the 609, 30 minutes on the 470, and 30 minutes on the 455, which eventually the 470 would become 15-minute headways. August 2027, implementation. This is basically what's in the works that we've been kind of with UDOT to help them get the Mountain View corridor improvements to be in place. But this is a big lift on the 5-year service plan. That's primarily why it's last, is because it requires 40 operators to operate it. Utah County, Northern, trying to figure out how we can best serve Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, kind of making that connection over to Front Runner. And everything beyond that is kind of vision items, increasing frequency on these routes. Some of this is restoration from pre-COVID. Opportunities to better serve the BDO. Some enhancements and frequency improvements in North Davis and South Weber. Making a connection from West Valley Central Station to the airport. Providing service on 3100 South, and trying to figure out how we can better address these industrial areas of Salt Lake City, because there's a lot of requests for it. It's just the employment density is so low. Like, there's a lot of employees, it's just very difficult to serve. Expansion of the on-demand zones, Southwest Salt Lake County, adding some routes as kind of an exit ramp on portions of on-demand if need be, because right now we're just throwing money at on-demand because it's so successful right now. Looking at on-demand in North Lehigh, expansion to Vineyard, more on-demand, and then implementation of future projects. So, a lot of information. Sorry I went long.
You're fine. If people wanted to find this information, where would they find it?
It should be on our website. There's this link. Let me see if I can paste it in there. Or if I have to stop sharing. Basically, if you go to this link or our website, our 5-year service plan should be on there.
FYSP.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I do want to hand it over to Greg, also over at UTA, to discuss a little bit more about the driver shortage. From there, we're running a little short on time, but I do want to make sure that we give updates on what our chapters are up to. So, Greg, I want to give you the proper amount of time, but I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Yeah, appreciate that. Joey, nice job. I got to tell you, watching those guys in UTA, the planners, it's a Tetris puzzle. Every time I step into there, I'm just amazed. The decision-making trees, the if-thens, these guys deal with a lot, and they're very good at it. So I appreciate everything that they do. Makes my job look easier anyway on the surface. Well, listen, I'm grateful for the invitation to speak with UTRU today. Excuse the background noise. I'm in southern Utah right now. Had a holiday plan over the weekend here to do some mountain biking, so I hope to be in the saddle in about 2 hours. So I'll keep this brief, but I do think it's important that we get into that we dip our toe into the weeds just a little bit, so you have an understanding of how we approach the business of staffing these operator positions and so forth, and what the headwinds are that we are dealing with right now, and how we're going to meet those headwinds. That kind of covers a little bit of the agenda. I'll share some insights into how UTA is positioning itself to manage through the Utah labor shortage, the economic boom that we have, inflationary pressures we're experiencing. At UTA, we recognize operators make up the majority of our employee population. However, to keep UTA in a position to serve our communities, it takes a whole team of diverse skills, backgrounds to keep us moving forward. And Jay, who's running the ship at UTA, has coined a phrase, and we all embrace it. Our culture is about one UTA, and we move you. It's not a catchphrase. It's actually our culture inside. I'll give you a quick little background on myself, where I came from. I fell in love with transit 25 years ago when I lived in San Francisco. I had an opportunity to use Muni and BART, and I've been on the subways in New York, and I've been in Europe, and I'm a big fan of transit. I've been a professional in the talent acquisition space for about 25 years, with about 15 years in running teams. And during that time, I've witnessed a lot of change. And what my colleagues and I are witnessing today in the labor market is extremely unique. We've got headwinds. It's a perfect storm when it comes to hiring in Utah, if not across the country. And you should know that kind of my philosophy, or my approach to the profession of talent acquisition comes from a strategy that's built around customers are candidates and candidates are customers. So really, when we approach the operator shortage here in Utah, it's not just about what are we doing to embrace recruiting strategies and talent acquisition strategies. It's what are we doing about communicating UTA as a brand overall? What can I do to leverage marketing, and what can marketing do to leverage talent acquisition? Because we're serving a very, very similar community, and most of it overlaps. So having said that, let me jump a little bit into some of the headwinds, give you an overview on where we're at today in the labor market. 2019, we're at 2.4% unemployment rate. And when we would deploy a lot of 2019 was previous to when I joined UTA, to give you some context. I joined UTA in 2020, right at the start of COVID. We had a 3.4% unemployment rate, and across the nation, we're probably hovering in the 10% unemployment rate. Utah is unique. We've got such a robust, strong economy that the labor force has always been in a negative position. Anything below, experts say, a 3.6% unemployment rate is basically you're in negative unemployment, because most of those people who are considered unemployed don't really want to be employed to begin with. And so that directly has to influence and inform how we approach the market today, the labor market, to find talent, seek out talent, attract talent into UTA. We've got inflation. Obviously, that's going to impact what people are asking for wages. And the job seekers have changed since 2019. When COVID hit, a lot of the labor force was laid off, or a significant part of the labor force was laid off. And now we're finding that not all of them want to come back. So we've got a diminished labor force, and we've got a higher or a lower unemployment rate that we're dealing with. And in our corridor that we serve right now between Ogden and Utah County, we've got a 1.9% unemployment rate. Now, Utah has never seen that kind of an unemployment rate. Significant headwind. So with those things kind of baked into those knowns, we can't avoid the knowns. We can't hide our head in the sand and say, well, that's going to go away eventually. No, we have to actually plan a strategy around that. And one of the things that we're really focused on that we've never been real good at in the past, as far as UTA goes, is telling our story. UTA is an incredible place to work. We're just not really good about talking about how good of a place we are to work. So that's part of what we're going to be doing. We came from a I call it posting and praying, where you post a job and we have 100 people apply for the job and we'll hire 20 operators out of that. Not a big deal. The formula worked for many, many years until COVID. And now if we post a job, we might get 20 applications by job seekers, and we might be able to hire 5 people when we actually need 10 to 20. So using that strategy moving forward is just going to put us into more of a deficit. So we're moving from a reactive to more of a proactive stance. When I was brought into the organization in 2020, it was all about help us build a brand, build a value proposition, help us tell our story. So we spent the first couple of years in COVID building that brand, building that vehicle, so to speak, that communication internally in that culture about who are we as UTA. Let's get a handle on that. And then how do we communicate that out to the general market? Now, I know for a fact that these numbers don't change. In fact, they've gotten worse when it comes to seeking out job seekers who are actively looking for jobs. Typically, it's been in the average of 10% of the labor market total is actively looking for a job. Right now, the statistics are showing us less than 5% of the labor market that has shrunk is actively looking for a job. So what does that tell us we need to do? Well, it would tell a good marketing person, I need to market. I need to go find my clients where they're sitting instead of waiting for them to find me. So we're doing a lot of that. We're cross-pollinating with UTA marketing to try and get our message out there on the marketing side to the customer, and also communicating when we have a recruitment message out, we are cross-pollinating and talking about service plans. So we're blurring the lines. We've hired a transit industry expert in recruitment marketing to help us. Ran a pilot last fall, had really great results with that. Have rolled that out this year, and we're going to be investing in that more than UTA has ever done before. But it's not like we're increasing spend; we're focusing spend in areas where they can better serve what it is, our mission in trying to attract talent. We've introduced and have upgraded our internal technology to allow us to better communicate internally to candidates that come in. We've got over 27,000 applicants sitting in a database that we're going to use recruitment marketing campaigns to. And again, cross-pollinating those communications with service offerings as well. So a little bit of insight into what we're dealing with. One of the things that you should be aware of is that we've introduced, when it comes to CDL in the past, we used to require somebody to have a CDL in order to not only drive a bus, but to be employed at UTA. And that was a bit of a luxury, I'll call it that, at the time, because we had more applicants than we could manage through the pipeline. Now we don't have that. We noticed when COVID hit, trying to get a bus operator, with all the hiring incentives that were going on out there, for every 10 offers we'd extend, we'd lose 8 of them to the market because we couldn't hire them fast enough. And so we changed that. We introduced early onboarding, where we actually hire individuals into the organization before they have their CDL. We train them to get their CDL. They get their CDL, and now they're employees of UTA from day one. And that's changed in a rough speak from losing 8 to actually being able to employ and keep 8 people in the pipeline. So it's been a huge lift for us. We're also looking at diversity outreach campaigns with our community engagement teams. We're out there recruiting with them side by side. We're developing with the state, running a pilot right now, which is an ESL program, So refugees, people who have English as a second language, communities that we couldn't serve in the past for a variety of different reasons. We know it's a strong population, and we're developing programs to help people learn the English language well enough so that they can actually drive, navigate, look at schedules in a bus, and so forth. So we're looking at those. We're trying to innovate in ways that UTA has never done before. We're out there and finding more job fair opportunities, and again, as I mentioned, UTA community engagements more than we've ever done before. We've restructured the team. I built the team around being brand advocates versus administrative, clerical, data entry folk and compliance-driven individuals, which is where we came in the past, and it worked really well in the past. It just won't work in this market that we're in today and moving forward to serve Utah. One of our focuses is on candidate experience and hiring manager experience, obviously, but candidate experience. Improving our brand means that we have to take care of our candidates coming in. So we're focused on that. And so let me summarize, and then I'll open up for Q&A. There are many headwinds that we deal with at UTA, and all companies are dealing with here in the Utah market. And obviously UTA is not immune to any of them. We've got low unemployment rate of 1.9%. We have fewer workers in the labor pool. And we've got bidding wars everywhere for this talent. We've got inflationary pressures that we haven't seen before since the 70s. And we have more transparency in the market. So it's not just a employer-driven market, it's a candidate-driven market. So it makes it super important for us to be focusing on the candidate experience. So whether we hire a candidate or not, we have a good experience, and they're not going to blast any negative press out there about UTA, false press out there about UTA. UTA is a great place to work, and we're going to be focusing on getting that word out there in the market. I'm encouraged, and I'll say this, I'm encouraged even with these headwinds. It's an invigorating opportunity for us to innovate, expand, and we're already making an impact toward August change day, and I'm confident we're going to have enough operators in our system to meet our current demands. So with that, I'll kind of end my conversation and open up for any questions.
I think we have time for one. So
yeah, so let me take this question for you, because I'm acutely aware of the labor market. I have a business. I have employees, and to be quite honest with you, everything you mentioned is lacking the number one thing, and I think you know what that is, and that is more wages. I think that nothing you've mentioned, and I did the same thing. I said, well, look, my brand has to be better. That's going to attract the right candidates. And then when it came down to it, those candidates simply walked away because the money wasn't there. So I had to vastly improve the wage structure in my system. So talk about that really quick. Where is that in UTA's vision as far as actually paying drivers better? Because right now the cap is $25 an hour, and that to me just doesn't cut it long range.
Yeah, Curtis, that's a great question. And let me kind of holistically give an answer to this. Obviously staffing just isn't about hiring more people. It's about also, if you've got a leaky dam and you're losing more people because of whether it's wages, culture, conditions, internal conditions, whatever that is, you can't, you're never going to win. So we've got a lot of internal things that we're working on to improve operator hiring or operator working conditions. I can't speak to that because I'm not the expert. I know they are happening. And when it comes to wages, Curtis, I can truly say that we're in the middle of negotiating with the union right now. So obviously, I'm not at liberty to talk about who, what, where, how, and when, and why. But I can say those are open discussions that are happening right now, and you will see some changes there. I just can't speak to that right now. Not because I have a gag order. I just don't know enough about what is going to ultimately, where it's going to end. I do know there are going to be improvements across the board in all of those areas. So holistically, when it comes to talent acquisition, it's not just about bringing people in. we understand that it's the whole employee life cycle, and we're looking at all of those things.
That is awesome. All right. Well, thank you both for being on the line. We're running a little long. We had a late start, unfortunately, and I know we're running late. So I want to just kind of go through just a few more things before we move on. I just want to give a couple chapter updates as far as what we were doing on the chapter front. So first of all, we have UTRU students. They aren't able to join us today, but they did give us kind of give me an update that I'd like to pass along. So UTRU students was officially chartered back in January, so last month. And they're designed to represent the transit-minded students at all of Utah's colleges and universities. Right now, they are working primarily up at the University of Utah, where one of the things that they're working on directly is vending machines that actually dispense inner tubes or bikes. They're going to be funding this through the U of U Sustainable Campus Initiative Fund. That's one of the things that they are working on. They are also working on becoming an actual club at the University of Utah, on top of being a charter with us here at UTRU. And once they're able to do that, they are going to be doing things like tabling, and they'll have access to more resources for flyers and those sorts of things. So they're very active up there. So if you are a student or know someone who is, the web address is there, utru.org/utru-students. I encourage you all to go over there and sign up if that is something that you are interested in. I also want to hand it over to Scott Harris in just a minute. Scott, just to give you a chance to unmute yourself. This is our newest one that is still in the preliminary phase. But yeah, Scott, I want to hand it over to you just briefly to talk about South Salt Lake and Sugar House.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I'm a pretty very new member actually to UTRU. I've been kind of interested in the transit and urban planning space for a while, and I've decided I need to turn interest into action. So yeah, I want to start doing more with my passion for getting people onto transit, and specifically South Salt Lake and Sugar House. I mean, this is where I live, so obviously I have a vested interest there in wanting to improve our transit situation there. And also, I mean, as we all know, Sugar House has been exploding in recent years, and it's doing a pretty good job. It has, a bunch of mid-rise buildings, pretty good density, but there's obviously still room to improve. As making it a place that people want to get there by transit, where it actually makes sense to do that. Because right now it's still pretty car centric, and just making that connections with the rest of Salt Lake, South Salt Lake, and the rest of the valley. So yeah, I'm excited to get started and excited to start making a difference.
That's awesome. Yeah. So right now, South Salt Lake Sugar House is in the preliminary phases. We are working on building out leadership, building out membership. That being said, I have no doubt we will find those individuals. And so if you are a person, you will probably be receiving a email message from me in the coming days regarding the fact that, oh, hey, we saw that you either take routes that go through here or said that you lived in this area. We'll be reaching out to help build that out as well. But yes, Scott reached out a couple months ago at this point, back in December. We had a great conversation, and it's excited to continue to grow our chapters across the state as we embark on this new level of what UTRU is providing. And so that leads me to the question of, though, well, you're not a student. You don't live in South Salt Lake. You don't do these things. So how do you start a chapter? Well, the reason we want chapters is that they really are the heart and soul of UTRU. It is what we are about. It is designed to guide our advocacy. And these chapters really can be focused on anything, geography, type of transit you use, or a common interest. So for example, we have students, we have South Salt Lake, we have, for example, if you were a front runner rider and you wanted to be UTRU front runner, we could have that be a chapter. But the biggest thing is you just kind of want to be involved. And the question is, well, am I just going to be out in the woods? Well, the answer is no. We at UTRU want to make sure that we're providing ongoing support for you if you do decide to start a chapter or maintain a chapter. What does that look like? Well, We reach out to members that might be interested. We provide ideas and surveys and suggestions of things that you might be able to do. If you have an initiative or something that's going on, we can help post that and publicize items and events so that we can get out the information. So if you do decide to start a chapter, just know that you're not going to be left on your own. We are here to work with you, but these chapters very much are supposed to be focused because, you know, the board members and myself can't be everywhere all at once. But if this is a area that is focused on your community, we can give you the tools to advocate properly for it, and then allow you on a more day-to-day basis have a real effect on transit advocacy in your communities. So if you do want to get started on that, I just want to let you know, go on over to utru.org/start-a-chapter to learn a little bit more. It's also on our homepage if you just kind of go through some of the drop downs. But if that is something that is of interest to you, please reach out. We are happy to work with you. I'll work with you personally on helping you navigate that process and have greater transit advocacy. So with that, John, I'm going to hand it over to you just to kind of wrap things up, and we will go ahead and call it a day.
Great. Thanks so much, Curtis. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. And of course, to our ongoing members and board members and founders who've been advocating for better transit in Utah all these years. Thank you, Rep. Briscoe, and thank you, the members of the UTA, for coming to speak with us today. I'm very excited about building up this organization and getting people to talk about transit in Utah. It's so important with air quality and our climate crisis and affordability crisis in Utah. The answer is transit, and the answer is to get people to talk about transit. So members and people listening, when you're around there, talk to people about how they get around. Talk to people about public transit. Talk to people about the benefits of it. Talk to people about how we're going to try and make it better and how they can get involved, and give them things to do and empower them to do so. And so with that, we'll call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much, everyone. Joseph, you have a hand raised. Do you want to stick around or go offline?
I'm happy to stick around to answer anybody's questions if you would.
Cool. I have some questions on the routes, so let's stick around and let's talk about it.
All right.
Well,
thank you very much. Yeah, for those of you that want to drop off, feel free to drop off. And yeah, we have just to let you guys know, we have my contact information on there as well if you want to reach out to me. But yeah, we can kind of do a stick around after party, so to speak. So feel free.
Yes. Only the right person and having some blues here, huh?
Yep.
Do you want me to bring up the presentation?
Yeah, bring up the presentation and let's see the first one. The very first thing that I want to congratulate you about is the idea about the 227. And I can't remember where that fits into the year plan. But if I looked at that correctly, the 227 is actually starting in Mill Creek, going down 27th West, and then up into the Sandy track station, if I remember my maps correctly.
Yeah, hold on.
Not a problem.
You guys seen the presentation?
Yep.
That's
It's it. Great. Yep, it's perfect.
Okay. That is, I think, vision.
It's in long-term vision. Is that where it's at? Yeah, there it is. So that's 3 years away.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's essentially what it is. It's a consolidation of the F590, the 227 part of the 232, the 39-ish.
Yeah, so give me an idea of why you think you've done that, because I know why I would do it. So I mean, I play around with a lot of different maps and just for fun, because back in the day I wanted to be a transit planner, but instead I went to accounting school. So here I am with the union and set up in the union. But my belief on this is that is that the more track stations a route goes to, the more ridership is actually going to somehow use that route. And of course, the number of riders will actually increase the more destinations the bus routes are actually going to.
I would agree with that. The challenge with multiple rail stations is figuring out where you prioritize your connections. Because usually, if it's a 30-minute route, the time connections, you have to prioritize which of the trains of the many different stations you're hitting. You have to prioritize that connection, and so there's going to be a winner, and
so
it may be
is the 227, do you expect that this 227 route will have increased ridership?
I mean, that's our hope with.
Do you have any numbers behind that?
We don't right now because we have the ability to model it. We just don't have the staff to put numbers behind it. And that's part of our process is just trying to get these service plans created and turned around. Hasn't given us the luxury of actually sitting down and modeling them.
Okay, now and then really quick, the other one now, and the other thing that's really so I was a really big fan and advocate of the new bus numbering system, and as an accountant with ADD, your new numbers are just freaking me out. Why the numbers that don't match where the buses actually go? And I kind of understand why, but just so you know, this Route 50 just makes no sense to me. I would have called it like 347 or 345, so that we know that it went up 47 south. But anyway, I just thought I'd mention that these new numbering systems are really freaking me out. Based on the numbering system that was put into place back in 2007. But the other one that I wanted to take a look at really quick was that was the 7th West 202 map that you had up here. Yes, and the 570. This looks very good. It looks similar to what the plans that I was actually looking at. Again, one of the reasons why this, as a rider, as a user, and I think I talked at the top of the hour, I don't own a car anymore, but why this is especially pleasing is that it hits some of the the Winchester Street the Fashion Place West Station is a good stopping off point. And to me, I cannot see why there will not be a good increase of ridership taking this to that location. The 570 route going into the heart of Midvale down Center Street to me looks like a really good route. But the thing that's frustrating is that the reason why it has to be moved is because of cars. The reason why 72nd South is so busy is because of cars. And unfortunately, if we had more people outside of cars, you could run that 570 along 72nd South without any problems. So it kind of ticks me off that we have to move the buses around the cars when really it should be the other way around. But these these two routes really make a lot of sense to me. Going through the high density area at the Bingham Junction Boulevard Transit Station, it makes it so that people that are outside of those areas can get to that track station and into town when they need to. So this looks really good, and I think it's a good plan.
So the irony of transit planning in Utah is that we're transit planners in a car world, and unfortunately, we're trying to do the best that we can and push the limits with UDOT. we coordinate with UDOT and try to push them, and they push back. And but yeah, I recognize your point.
Yeah, that's good. And like I said, I mean, I could go over each of these routes and tell you how I feel about them. The other one too that's kind of interesting. Maybe you can explain it to me. It's the Ogden 611 and the 612 route. So 612 was 15 minutes, and under this scenario, it's going to be a half-hour service, and then a new 611 connection that will be 15 minutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wasn't involved in the creation of this, but my just looking at it, it's my understanding is that it's trying to optimize the frequency in the area that needs it the most, and but still maintain the coverage that the 612 has, by running it 30 minutes the full length, and then having an offsetting route or overlaying 15-minute in the areas that is most conducive for 15-minute headways.
But that potentially means though that on some points of Washington Boulevard, you're actually getting 7 or 8 minute service.
Yeah.
So that to me again makes sense based on where we're at with drivers and the limited amount of funding that there is. So initially when the 612 was cut back, or yeah, when it was cut back from the north, and then the south point was 15 minutes. But again, one of the problems, and this is again, how many 15-minute routes are there in Ogden? You know,
Not a lot.
One right now,
Yeah.
or and it's like this, you know, and I don't know how as an organization, and this is one of the conversations that we've been having lately, is that frequency is where people are going to get on the bus. And so it's very frustrating to see areas like this where there's only one 15-minute corridor, and it's what Joel Briscoe was talking about, the cart before the horse and the chicken or the egg. We're kind of in a tough spot, but as a union, we basically want buses and trains everywhere possible, every 5 to 10 minutes, running up and down every street that there is. And sales tax should be 2%, but then that's just my thought. And maybe property tax should be increased to deal with this. But again, as a carless person, maybe I ask for too much. But this really does make sense, and it's another. I think it's a good it's a good service swap, if you will.
So as a transit planner, I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, my job would be so much easier if I had unlimited resources. And to kind of address that thought about why isn't there more frequency, and as a transit planner, it's us trying to balance between. I mean, we can make frequency in certain areas. We just need to cut routes in other areas to make that possible. I mean, historically, it's been because of funding, but as is fully well known, now it's labor. And so, and even if we had like a 2% revenue source with sales tax, my concern is I don't think there's enough people that are capable of operating the system to doing what we all want. And this is where autonomous buses becomes more critical in the future. And unfortunately, that was set back with COVID. And so, no, I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
And just for the record, having owned a Tesla that would drive itself, I would totally get on a bus without a driver. I would totally get on that bus. And if it could, because if it meant I could have 7 or 8 minute headway on the 209, to me, that just sounds like that's the future, and that's obviously would be great. But the autonomous buses still have issues as well. But anyway, I have taken up a lot of time. If anybody else has any questions, go jump right in.
Yeah, Joe, what are your ridership numbers you're projecting for the next in the 5-year plan? And what are ridership numbers now? Really, what I find online is somewhere around like 130,000 trips, or what is that? What's the metric, and where is that metric going?
Well, as of right now, like I said earlier, we didn't model a lot of these just because of lack of resources to do so. But
system. Sorry.
I mean, we have a projection. I think we have our next year projections is like 2% increase with the anticipation of a potential recession. Hold on one sec. Let me see if I can. Pull up our most recent dashboard. A lot of what is making up the 5-year service plan right now is responding to project development that has occurred, and alter the lines associated with those projects. The other thing is trying to restore a lot of the service that was reduced during COVID. So we're trying to fill in these service gaps before we see a lot of expansion. And that's kind of the what we're trying to get across to a lot of elected officials and policy decision makers, is that before you go about coming up with a new project, there's this gap over here, and here that needs to be addressed before we start talking about hundreds of $1 million project. And so so a lot of this has just been focused on restoration and filling those gaps. And like I said, we don't have the ridership projected out right now, although we hope to do that going forward.
Okay. Yeah, I was seeing numbers around like something like 149,000 weekday average boarding before COVID, and I think we've recovered to something like 80% or 90 or 70% of that, like in the 130 range, I think. And when I'm looking at, go ahead, Joe.
I was gonna say that sounds about right. I got a update on our dashboard the other day that I'm just pulling up to confirm. I just need to look for it real quick.
And when I'm thinking about the future in Salt Lake, in terms of air quality as well as in terms of climate change, with 25% of all emissions from climate change or from transportation, and then looking at like that we're a relatively dense area in terms of overall population density relative to other parts of the country, really along the Wasatch Front. So 2% a year in growth in ridership. We need something more like, by 2030, we need to be looking at 500%, 900% growth in ridership, and thinking about how do we move the needle to get there, and what a system looks like to do that. We talk about unlimited resources, et cetera, but we're talking about a transit imagined project, and Curtis is working on this. And what would this city look like? What would things how would people react to much more frequent service and much better coverage? And wondering what ways we could, at UTRU, look for ways to partner on something like that, on resources to say, like, hey, what if we flip the switch here and we're not talking about just filling gaps and plugging holes in the dam, or plugging holes in the ship, or the rowboat as UTA is, but what if we looked at something not just like a Houston Transit Reimagined, but something like the Toronto system, where you have that frequent bus service and you have 50% of daily trips in that region taken by transit. And that's the case for a lot of Canadian cities. Even some smaller Canadian cities are in the 20 to 30% range, whereas we're more in that 5% or less range of daily trips are taken by transit. And so what I'm wondering is there any appetite, or where would we start the conversation to partner on a study, or around a study or a report, or kind of a process to say, like, hey, what would things look like, and what would it take to get us to 50% of trips along the Wasatch Front taken by transit? What would that take? What would it look like? And what would the impacts be in terms of air quality, health, and people's economic resources? So then you don't have to buy 2-3 cars for a household, and if you're able to be a single car household, or maybe even no cars, as some are.
I mean, yeah, that the scope of that would be rather large, but because it becomes less about the transit you're offering. Well, that's a component. It's about the levels of service that you're offering, but it's the policies behind a lot of it, that behind the transportation network, that drive that potential. Because 50% mode share is going to be a function of disincentivizing the use of the automobile to the point that, well, life is better using transit than it is, and that becomes a much broader study than just UTA.
Of course.
And so, I mean, I would say it's the likes of escalating it to the legislature. I mean, I could probably coordinate with you guys on the development of a plan and see how that coincides with UTA's plans.
Yeah, we'd be wondering where would we start that conversation? Because I feel like there's a lack of imagination and a lack of an ability to say, this could be our future, and this future could actually be better than what we have right now. And I think people just don't understand. Like, they're so stuck in their, like, needing a car, but they're not happy. They're not happy. Like, people who I talk to about their commute, about how they get around town, they're not, like, totally satisfied that they have to sit in traffic. They're not very happy about all these traffic accidents. They're not happy about road safety and distracted drivers. They're not happy about air quality. They're not happy about gas prices. Like, people are, you scratch below the surface of car dependent America, and there's a lot more going on there than meets the eye, I think, that we assume. And I think part of the issue is that people just don't see that it could be different. And maybe that's a bit of a provincialism on our part, that even our neighbors next door see that it can be different, and they have a different set of expectations. And some cities in America see that it can be different as well. And so I want Utah to have that conversation. And I want people to start understanding that that's a possibility, that it's not going to bankrupt us to have a good transit system. We're actually paying a lot more having a bad transit system than we would be if we had a good transit system.
You know, and that's an interesting point too, John, because since giving up my car, I am a much happier, healthier person. I walk a little bit more now. There's also this little I have like $900 a month extra to spend on stuff. You know, because because really when I had my Tesla, and I've mentioned this before, this is, you know, primarily for Joseph. I had my Tesla sat in my garage since I bought it, at basically $780 a payment, and I would maybe take it to the grocery store or pick up coffee. I put 2,000 miles on it. That was all I put on it in 2 years. And so to sit there and say, okay, here's my $800 a month or $780 plus insurance and all that, it just does not make sense. And that's where the car centric, that's where everybody is. I got to have a car to get around. My sister had a family project to put pictures from a family album to everybody, and she had it ready, and I had to go down and pick it up. Well, she didn't know I didn't have a car. I told her I was going to take the bus. Well, when I got there, she was like, "Oh, Chris, you don't have a car? What happened? Are you okay?" And I'm going, I am like, I can't tell you how ecstatic it is to get on the bus and look at my phone for an hour or do whatever else I need to do rather than focused on the 20 or 30 minutes it takes to get someplace. So yeah, John is completely right. We need to change that attitude about where we're at in America with the car centric. Everything's the car, and we simply do not need the car. And I know that Mike Christensen's on here. He's had a car, or he has not had a car for, I don't know how many years has it been, Mike? 4 or 5 years. It's been quite a while, and he's happy. I mean, he lives downtown or in the city. I'm a little bit outside of the city, so it's a little less. It's harder for me to get places, especially since you took out the 15-minute 45. And we've talked about this. This is the drawback, because now I have to spend more time in the liquor store buying liquor because the bus doesn't come in 15 minutes. So it's making me drink a little bit more, but maybe I guess I should complain about that. But overall, I'm happier and healthier now that I don't have a car.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, we want to have this conversation, and we want Utah to have this conversation. And UTA is going to need to be at that table. So it doesn't necessarily mean to say, like, we want UTA to spend all these resources planning for some pie in the sky thing. That's not what we're asking. We're asking, how do we partner with UTA? How do we, share resources and have a conversation to move that project forward so that we can help flip the switch from saying, we need to fill in service gaps, and we're looking at small increases in ridership to say, like, all of a sudden, like, hey, you know what? People have an appetite for this, because depending on ridership, to build that appetite with the system as is probably not going to happen. Like, just to be honest, like, with the way it is now, maybe free fare will make enough of a bump to get some federal funding in, like what Briscoe was saying. I'm kind of skeptical that that's actually going to materialize. I think there was a big novelty factor to February free fare that is evidenced by the increased ridership on the weekends versus the weekdays, and maybe increasing free fare for the weekends for tourism purposes on the Wasatch Front with Front Runner especially would be beneficial. But I still don't see that as flipping the convo, and so we're trying to think with tactical transit and stuff. We're trying to think about what are ways we can strategically come in to supercharge the UTA. So I guess the question is, who do we talk to, and how do we start that conversation there?
So we've already started a major effort to get to that point. It's probably a little more grounded, I would say, but basically we're working on our long range transit plan right now, which is looking out 30 years, and it's different from the regional transportation plan in that it's less focused on project development and more focused on service development. And I've been working on a 30-year network to be a guiding document for that. Now, it's looking at, so we have guidelines at UTA on where we're going to put fixed route transit. Specifically, whether it's market dependent or the operating environment. And so we would be looking at a bus route on every major arterial, some minor collectors. There's about trying to achieve, or one of our strategic goals from our executive board is to have, from our executive director and the board, is to have 70% of our service area within half a mile of a bus stop. And that's the goal. And so the exercise that you're talking about, where it's like, okay, what's the network look like that produces 50% mode share? I guess that conversation has to come from the top down for us to.
Some political. Okay. That's good. That's good to know. Because we want to know where UTA is and where what are the levers we need to pull, what are the directions we need to build support in order to help UTA do its, do better and improve. Right. We want UTA to improve. We want to see UTA be successful.
That feeds into the question that I stayed on to kind of, I'm curious about, and that is with the Olympics looking kind of imminent, and you got this 30-year planning process. And last time we had the Olympics, we got a lot of infrastructure money and help on building out our infrastructure. What kind of plans or ideas have you come up with on that?
So here's the thing: is that prior to the Olympics, with the tracks line, the tracks line has done great things for the system. It's also encouraged the application of this mode to be provided in areas that may not be necessary. And so there's been greater emphasis. This is my opinion. This isn't UTA. So let's just be forthright about that.
That's okay. We won't tell anybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we still recording?
Are we still recording though, Curtis?
We are recording still, it looks like.
We are still recording, yes.
Well, hopefully I don't get fired. Basically, since the introduction of tracks, people's policymakers and decision makers has been more oriented on getting major projects for economic development and not necessarily about moving people. And so the narrative and the dialogue that happens at the high level is about, okay, if I want my fair share, I want my project. And it becomes more about building a project and less about producing service.
Yeah.
And you could argue that by building a project, you're producing service, but more times than not, it usually results in displacement of a service that was previously there. And an example of this is the streetcar, Sugar House streetcar. Sugar House streetcar was not built to move people. It was built to be a catalyst for economic development, and it worked. It's brought $2 billion in economic development to the area. And the ridership on that is going to probably be fluctuate between 1,500 and 2,000 for the foreseeable future. The ridership growth that's going to take place on that area is going to be on the bus route that existed prior to the streetcar. And so I guess the emphasis that what the point I'm getting at is that our decision makers and elected officials are so hyper focused on the project side of things that they see as trying to fulfill this need of economic development, but they're blinded by the fact that it's not necessarily about moving people. The only reason you have a major project is if you have service that's at capacity. And I mean, working with the Canyon stuff, I mean, the best solution for the Canyon is probably a train. But do I want that? No, because I have a personal connection to the Canyon, and I don't want a train interrupting my ability to use the Canyon. But the reason I say that the train is the best option is because from a capacity standpoint, at a fixed point in time, that's the best solution. Throwing 15, 16 buses an hour going up the canyon may be more environmentally sensitive. Maybe not. But that's 15, 16 operators an hour going up there. A lot of resources for not necessarily about getting people to work. It's people getting people to their recreation. It has a private value to the resorts, and so that's a different conversation. But the point being is that the narrative at the top is oriented around the only way we're going to improve air quality is if we build something, and not necessarily put more service out on the street. And that's the narrative that needs to change at the top.
Yeah, let me kind of there's a couple things along that line. I mean, again, I started the union in 2013 when back then everybody on UTA they basically said bus service is our number one priority. That's what we want to change. And then the next day, after making that comment, they all got on an airplane, flew to Switzerland to look at the cog railways that went up, because they were at that time they were hoping they could put a cog railway up Little Cottonwood Canyon, or up the Cottonwood Canyon. And so again, you're right. I mean, this has been the problem year after year after year, is that we do focus on projects that don't necessarily move the right number of people to where they go. And I mean, I've been a big, anywhere we can get a bus or a train, I'm more of a bus person. I think more buses is going to work, but obviously if the train is going to work, we need the train. But one of the lower performing tracks lines is the red line out to out to Daybreak, right? And it's been that way, you know, for years. And the idea is that, well, the growth is going to be out there, so we're making the investment, but now we have to run a train online on areas where service isn't necessarily there. And one of the things that I can commend UTA for doing, which again, this is another thing that shows up. So everybody knows that the prison it has been destroyed out at the point of the mountain, so that we can develop that area out there, which is not a bad thing. But early on, UTA has come out and said that a tracks line is probably not the best use of resources, and building a tracks line out into that area is probably not going to be the best way to move people. And so we want to do a BRT. Well, guess what? Lo and behold, the plans that are out there show 2 track stations as potential for development. But yet here it is, UTA has basically come out and said, well, a BRT line, a bus route, can handle that more efficiently. Well, the people that want to build the tracks lines are the people that know that supposedly if we build it, we're going to get, you know, more people there. But in my mind, what's good for the prison development is just simply a bus line. And I think that 140, the Route 146 pretty much says what needs to happen for bus service out there. People need to get to Draper Station, which, by the way, again, if anybody who looks at a map and can tell me that Draper Station is the best use of land to get people to move in and out of that, it's not. The Draper Station was clearly designed for people to drive their car, park it at the big garage, and then, you know, hop on the front runner. But again, they're simply not doing that. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons why they're not doing that. But again, I agree 100%. It's why the union was founded, in that we are project oriented and not people moving oriented. And Randy, that's not to say that we should not look to build any new services that we might need. But again, you know, the 2 things is we can't just build it just because you know, it's what we should do to build it. Because again, I mean, like you said, it's the same thing with the streetcar line. Yes, it brought people and money there, but most of the people that are there aren't using the transit that's available. So to me, it seems to be it's a waste of the investment and the waste of the resources. And just final, I mean, I can talk for hours on transit, but one last thing I want to say is that UTA is getting much better on the fact that people do not have cars. You know, you look at all of the, you know, 10, even 15 years ago, the idea was, well, everybody owns a car, so let's work around, you know, they get in their car and they drive to the track station and park it and then get on the tracks. Well, again, if it's still taking you 10 or 15 minutes to get to the track station and only 10 or 15 minutes to get to where your ultimate goal is, there's no need to park that car. You just drive it into town or drive it to wherever you're going. But I do recognize there is a shift in the fact that there are people without cars, and that and they're not just poor people, right? They're not just poor people without cars.
So I guess I clarify my question a little bit more. I'm not saying what new projects are they going to do. I'm saying there's no question that if we get the Olympics, there's a ton of resources available to change things and to leverage that event. So how can we do that and make it more efficient? I mean, what's the planning to do it? Because we can't wait until the money's there and then decide what to come up with.
They have to decide before.
You know, if it means we say we want to add the service, then that's great. But maybe it's upgrading the buses to more efficient or more environmentally friendly, or
Better
maybe
stops.
it's the way the roads are designed to put. I don't know, but it just seems like you're right. I remember when you could get around by basically taking a bus two ways. So you go down 7th East and you turn on 2nd South or 33rd South or 13th South, and then you were where you wanted to be. Now you got to go down the tracks and then go and then, so I understand that it doesn't necessarily mean it's better, but it's totally different now that there's tracks. So I'm just curious how we can leverage those resources the best, because it's going to come, I think. I mean, it's pretty imminent.
The Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Well, and the Olympics, I mean, we have what we had for the last Olympics, and then some. So the Olympics is a more strategic approach that we need to have, not or even a tactical approach, because the Olympics only last 2 weeks. We have to plan for before then and beyond, but that's not to say that. So I'm less concerned about the Olympics being the driver for how we design the system than I am about what's best long term and regionally.
Yeah, and I'm totally on board with that. The system shouldn't be designed around an event that lasts 2 weeks, but the chance to do some of the system.
You're saying to leverage that opportunity
and say, look, if we had this, it'd be so much better. But it's also helps the system overall, not just for that one time. So it's a legacy advantage. I don't know. It just seems like we should be thinking about that.
Yeah, like double or something.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's one of the goals. I mean, I think one goal is the organization with the future of Frontrunner. We have the future of light rail study that's taken place. Frontrunner is a big priority for our leadership. There's a desire to get it to 15-minute headways. But then it goes back to that takes resources, and we just need a lot more resources to do what you guys, and even I myself, have thought about. And it's just how do we do it? I mean, it's not only about funding anymore either. I mean, if we want to, it's about vehicles, staffing, not just operators, because we got to be thinking about our mechanics, our operations supervisors, and all that overhead that goes with that. I mean, if we double our fleet, I mean, we need new facilities, we need all these things, and I'm all on board with what you guys are saying. It's a big lift, and to have that conversation, to change the mode share, it needs to come from the legislature. It needs to come from the governor, the people that people are elected officials need to be
smacked silly.
Talking. Well, we are very our culture in Utah is very impressionable based on what our elected officials say. And when they're saying one thing, when maybe the right thing is the other way, like having 50% mo share, it's just got to be this paradigm shift in our culture in Utah that where we're going to get ahead on this.
Yeah, and I think how we do that is how we are attempting to build the organization to get more people involved as riders or transit users. I mean, this is one thing we did years ago with our mission statement. Essentially, is that everybody is a transit user, right? Everybody on the freeway is a transit user. Everybody uses a mode of transit. It's just that right now most people use the private car as their mode, and most people don't recognize that because they are in that mode, they are the ones that are causing all the problems. The freeways are packed with transit users. That if half of the people on the freeway got onto a train or a bus, it just would not be there anymore. And so the way to change that through the legislature, and then there'll be an argument as to whether that actually works, because we've done certain things politically that by people, like initiatives that ultimately get overturned by the legislators. But again, I think the big thing is what we're doing here. Especially with the new chapters, that's great. The more people we can bring to the table and have conversations about. I mean, I would love for there to be thousands of comments every time you put out a draft statement and want comments. Thousands of people need to be talking about this and need to be getting their voices heard. And I think that our organization is one way that that happens. But
so I'm happy to assist you guys where I can. I'll have to talk to our leadership on if there's a conflict there between my participation and my actual work. But let us get the long range transit plan up and going, and the document out there, and having you guys comment on it would be super helpful. And then we can document where it's lacking, and we could say it's lacking because
it's lacking because it's not enough. I mean, that's our point of view, is it's lacking because it's not enough.
Agreed.
Joe, what's the time for that, the 30-year plan?
End of the year.
End of the year. Okay, great. Let's finish off maybe, or at least I'm going to set off because I am host overnight 2 nights in a row. But practical stuff. Who's in charge of bus stops and shelters and benches at bus stops? Is that individual municipalities? Is that the UTA? Because that's a nice project, I think, for the membership to start adopting bus stops, start talking about, it makes you feel better. Bus shelters and stops make you feel more welcomed as a rider. And they also, studies have shown they decrease the amount of time that people feel like they're waiting subjectively, if you actually have something to wait at. And it's a nice project for people to kind of adopt a bus stop and pressure. And it's a nice little thing that's practical. That's a practical win we could start to build for our membership.
Totally agree. We have a whole bus stop team that works on that. We have a bus stop master plan. We went from 5 years ago only being allocated $150,000 a year to improve a bus stop to $1.5 million a year to make improvements to bus stops. And what the bus stop master plan does is it prioritizes where we make those improvements. And the challenge that we've been working on this for 5 years now. The challenge that we've been dealing with bus stops and making those improvements is right-of-way acquisition. And so it's that's the challenge. And even if ironically, bus stops are very complicated.
Joseph, just so John knows, a couple years ago we did have somebody from the bus stop unit that came out and talked about this specifically and how truly complicated it is. But yeah, you could explain a little bit more. But basically, they came out and they talked about the different types of shelters, the new bus stop signs that they were putting up, and the problems behind implementing that. I mean, COVID kind of put a kibosh on a lot of the processes that they were doing to replace signs. But having been, and I mean, you've seen some of the new stops, John. I know you go, wow, these are great. It would be nice to have these, completely throughout the entire system. But again, part of the problem is, well, I mean, money is the bigger thing, and time, right? It just takes money and time. But our membership does, we can kind of guide that the decisions as to which stops are the priorities and which ones that they're foregoing based on other routes. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a strong effort going forward. The conversation of the organization has transitioned to understand that that's a value. The sponsorship of stops is something that our customer experience and our community engagement team has been coordinating, specifically with trying to brand some of the stops or have a wrap around the stops to try to minimize vandalism. The issue that when it comes to trash collection and stuff like that, we would rather just take that on ourselves because we want to be responsible for that and not rely upon other individuals to be responsible for that. Because if we are, and you'll see this with the Lamar advertising shelters that aren't UTAs, trash at those shelters is an issue. And so if you reach out to me, we can I can get you set up with our bus stop team.
Awesome. That'd be great. And then the last question we have is, we talked about fare capping, I think, and there was a fare capping pilot. And I was wondering about that. And then what team is there at UTA that works with kind of low income riders to increase accessibility? Because I think part of this free fare thing, there may be some political opportunity with legislators to talk about expanding transit access to lower income communities, and helping them as kind of a way to direct some of that energy.
I haven't been involved with the fair stuff really. We have a fairs department. There's a lot of conversations going around about fairs, and I mean, the fare capping was a few years ago.
Because it ended, yeah. At least according to the one random website that I could find about it at the UTA.
Yeah, I don't know much about it, honestly.
Yeah, and over the years, John, they've run several fair type programs or studies I know it's probably been 2 or 3 years ago that we were involved with a particular study about measured fares. Somebody was talking about measured fares again, where there would be zones, and that I didn't like. But
that got a hard no from our board. So
yeah,
a lot of the momentum right now is behind zero fare, for better or worse. Like you guys have highlighted some of the challenges with zero fare, and I agree with that. I mean, according to the consultant, we have some capacity in our network to absorb the increased ridership. The question then becomes, okay, there goes the money that we would have used for expansion.
Exactly.
So,
and the studies that I've seen show that free fares don't really move people out of cars. They move cyclists and walkers onto buses. And there's kind of a mode shift between, it's not as effective at reducing vehicle use and air quality as we would like to think it would be. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. That's just what I've read.
I'm assuming that it'll most likely increase leisurely trips, trips to the zoo, trips to museums, trips to those events that people just want to avoid the parking issue.
Which is good. We want people to do. But is that worth blowing a hole in the budget, I guess is the question.
Right. I mean, $25 million, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, and so the whole argument behind the legislature, which is just really weird, and that's why I asked Joel that question, is it's just really weird that they're talking about no fare, free fare, whatever you want to call it, when again, I mean, this is what we've been talking about, but we've also been talking about, well, in order to do that, you still have to allocate money for expansion, and so my fear is that, okay, so up on the legislature, they give they do the no fare, here's your $25 million, but then when it comes to more buses and that, they're going to say, well, no, we don't need that. You guys got free fares, that's what you wanted. And it's like, well, it's not what we wanted. We want that and expansion.
Yeah, it feels like a crap in some ways. Like,
I share that sentiment.
So guys, we are at 12:30. And so I mean, more than happy. No, it's
not
fine.
Too happy with me.
It's fine. We'd be happy to invite you back, maybe to one of our board meetings, to have you kind of have this opportunity to talk and ask more in-depth questions. But at this time, I am going to go ahead and call it for you guys. Thank you for spending the extra time. Thank you for everybody that decided to stick around and hear the after conversation. But yeah, we will go ahead and call it a meeting on this one. Thank you all very much, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Joey, for sticking around. That was great.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Take care.